Hello all, B.L.Carter here, affectionately known as Miss B, hoping that you are working to get your puzzle put together one piece at a time. For those of you who know me, you know this is one of my areas of deep concern, very near and dear to me, the area of abuse, and I advocate for abuse victims in all capacities. Whether it's elder abuse, whether it's child abuse, sexual abuse, physical, financial, emotional, no matter who it is abuse, and it is wrong. In light of the R. Kelly situation, I just wanted to weigh in my 2 cents, not necessarily to the R. Kelly situation specifically, but just in general. And as you can see on your screen here, I have the power and control wheel, and wanted to highlight really quickly some of the ways in which abuse can occur. I see no difference between sexual abuse and emotional abuse, between sexual abuse and physical abuse, between sexual abuse and pastoral or spiritual abuse. Abuse is abuse. It violates someone else in such a way that most can never understand. And so I'm just going to go over this power wheel, just really quickly highlight, and it's on the screen. Pause if you need to look at it, digest it. But we'll start here at the top where it says using intimidation. The abusers tend to use various intimidation methods to make their victims afraid. This particular wheel focuses more on domestic violence or domestic abuse within the home. However, these principles can apply to every abuser-victim situation. Every single situation they can apply to. So we just changed a few of the words here and there, and it would apply. So abusers would use intimidation, making them afraid to act, to respond, or to do. So that's why the victim might not respond to things the way they used to, or they might not travel the way they used to, or they might not even want to leave the home. They might not want to go to a particular location suddenly. Chances are they're afraid that something is going to happen, or there'll be a repeat, or even memories, flashbacks, if they go to a particular location. Abusers will abuse the property or destroy the property of their victims just to intimidate them, to let them know, hey, I've got the power and control. I destroyed your property and I will destroy you. I've mistreated your pet and I can do you. That sort of thing. Moving on around to emotional, which is just before the 3 o'clock hour, if we were looking at this as a time clock. Putting them down, making them feel bad about themselves, calling them names, making them think they're crazy, playing mind games, humiliating them, making them feel guilty. This is a whole lot more common than most people think. It pains me so for people to have to experience this, and something I've been advocating about more recently is how this emotional abuse is used in the churches. I've literally seen, actually I've directly experienced pastors, and I've seen it and experienced it, pastors putting down members, or even myself, or making them feel bad about themselves. Now the pastor knows he's doing wrong, but again, in order to maintain power and control over someone who might be aware of what he's doing, or who he wants to be able to control and keep under his thumb, he's calling her names from the pulpit. He's defaming her name, her character. He's got people thinking she's crazy. He'll quickly pull out and say she's not doing godly behavior, or it might be he, I don't He's listening to Satan, not God. His actions are satanic. He's evil. Humiliating him, things like that. Isolation is another biggie. Trying to control what your victim does, who they see and talk to, what they read, where they go, who contacts them, who they can contact. As I told you all, it's very near and dear to me because I've experienced it firsthand, and actually going through some of it now. A little different situation, but it's still abuse is abuse. And so that effort to, if you can't control the person, you try to control what everyone else thinks about them, hears about them, sees about them, and knows about them. So if you're able to control them, you limit who they can communicate with in whatever ways you can. If it means sabotaging their phones or their emails, or I had one situation where the person who was being abusive to me actually reached their hand inside, and I knew that they were getting unsafe, and so I went to my vehicle to leave the situation, and this person came up behind me and stuck their hand inside the window of my vehicle, was able to grab the keys, snatch the keys out so my vehicle was stopped, threw my keys into the darkness of the night in a grassy area, forcing me to have to stay there and tolerate or accept the punishment that they intended to mete out to me that particular day. So, controlling where you go, definitely. Minimizing, denying, and blaming. Been there, done that, seen it. This is what victims go through. The perpetrators, they make light of the abuse. They don't take the abuse seriously when it's brought up. Or they'll say it didn't happen. Or they'll shift and try to blame it on the victim and say they, you just use a male and female. The man says to the wife, I slapped you because you made me. Or the pastor says to the parishioner, I stood in the pulpit and talked your business because you weren't listening to God and you didn't obey God, so I needed to put you on blast so that you could obey God. Parent says to the child, I didn't mean to burn you with the iron, but you weren't getting it any other way, so that way at least now you have a reminder what I expect of you. Blaming the victim for your behavior. Using children. We're down just a little bit past the 6 o'clock hour on this time wheel, if you will. Trying to make them feel guilty about their children. Using the children to relay messages. Children have no business in the middle of anything that's adult related, but putting the kids in the middle of it. I had someone try to hurt my children just to get to me. At the same time, I had someone even threaten to make up a case with CPS to try to get my children taken away if I didn't follow his lead and do what he wanted me to do, etc. And I won't go into a whole lot of detail about it, but yeah, that is what occurred. So using the children, threatening, like it says right there, threatening to take the children away. Move on over, using male privilege, treating her like a servant. And again, this is from a perspective of a husband, wife, or male, female in the home, but you can input any other abuser's person, and the victim would still suffer the same consequences. Treating them like a servant, making all the decisions. Your victim is supposed to just follow suit to whatever you say, without regard for them being an adult or having an opinion in anything. The abuser acts like they're the master of the castle, or they're the boss of everything. They're the ones who define the roles. They define all the rules. They define everything. And the victim has no input or no say-so in anything. Economic abuse. That's a biggie. preventing them from getting or keeping a job, making her ask for money. And this is something I lived, when he tries to block you from working or try to sabotage whatever work you are doing so you don't work, so that you could focus on him, or so that you can be dependent upon him so you can turn around and shit all over you, right? Yeah. But even in the case of parent-child, same thing. The parent wants to control the child, so the parent is going to steer the child in which directions they want them to work, or no, don't work. As you know, a case I saw firsthand, the father in the home did not want anybody else to work, and when he finished shitting all over that family, no one in the home worked. So the parent, the mother, as well as the children who were of working, teenage years, nobody had jobs. Nobody had a way of taking care of themselves because the father wanted to control everything, and when he finished shitting on them, they were really left in a bad, bad situation. So it's not just, again, husband-wife. It could be parent-child. I've seen it directly with pastor and church member, taking advantage of them financially, taking their money, not letting them know about or having access to other resources that might be available, manipulating them out of their monies, saying, hey, we need this offering for an air conditioner, and really you're getting the money and, you're going on a Vegas spending spree or something. And then doing it to people who don't have the capacity to just kind of let the money go. People who are struggling to pay their bills at home, but you're telling them this is God's expectation, or this is, your obligation biblically, or something along those lines, using their salvation, their spirituality, and their divine favor as a bargaining tool, if you will, to manipulate them for your own purposes. Abuse is abuse, and so many people are abusing each other. I say we look at the R. Kelly situation, and we begin having real dialogue. And then we begin addressing the people who are doing it. It's not enough. This Me Too movement is not enough. First of all, it's been hijacked, and it's not about, it's been hijacked into something completely different. I'll just leave it there because that's a whole nother topic. But let's just get back to the basics. Put R. Kelly aside. What about Main Street folk? What about Uncle Ray Ray and Aunt Bay, or Pastor John, or Cousin Joe? All of those people who are not on anybody's television, they're not on anybody's radio, they're, just regular Main Street, Joe Schmoes down the street, who are perpetrating various abuses in one way, who are beating on their spouses, who are beating on their children, who are beating on their church members, who are using and manipulating their church members for funds, for emotional, abusing and mistreating them emotionally. What about abusing and mistreating them for their resources, their physical labor, free labor? You've got a lot of pastors who like to do that, and there are some people that some parents I know would do that to their kids. Just keep them working like donkeys or slaves or something, barely acknowledging them, barely appreciating them, but just keep them working. And it's like they're constantly running for that carrot of approval. They're constantly running for that carrot of meeting God's expectations, if it's a pastor and church member. And it never comes, because you always want them to do something else. You always want them to neglect home to, come paint the church, or neglect work, or take a day off work, or if they happen to be off work, spend that free time at the church doing church stuff or giving resources to the church, when they probably should be asleep, or they probably should be putting that time in with their parents, their spouse, their children, or some way other than all that time at the church. The parents that I've seen do this with their children, same thing exactly. running them ragged constantly. If they're working really hard trying to do what it is they need to do, as soon as they get off work, the parents have got a whole laundry list of stuff they need for the children to do. Now, and I'm thinking more specifically adult children. Young children, yes, definitely. But even the adult children, when they're out and they're working, we would be surprised how many adult parents still try to emotionally and economically manipulate and abuse their adult children. And they use the excuse, well, I gave you birth, I did so much for you growing up, this is expected, this is what I need, etc., etc. I promise you, this is my area of advocacy. I see it, and it's my area because much of this stuff I've lived to some capacity. But yeah, our question is, forget about R. Kelly. What about Uncle Ray Ray? What about Aunt Bay? What about Pastor John? What about Cousin Joe? What about all those who saw and did nothing while the victim was being abused? Every single one of you who saw and did nothing, who turned a blind eye. What about you all? Or what are we going to do about them? While we're talking about R. Kelly and whatever's going on, are we talking about those who we know knew that somebody was being abused and turned a blind eye? What about those who heard the cry of the victim and denied them help? A victim has cried out and we denied them help. Not we, me. I say we collectively, just so I don't single out anybody in particular. Make sure I don't, divulge any one particular person's situation or name. So I'll say the we. But yeah, we heard the victim cry for help. They may have cried on the phone. They may have cried to you personally. They may have done it on social media, wherever they cried, and you denied the help. What about you? What about those of you who facilitated the abuse? Who set up the meetings? Who set up the scenarios? Who set up the plots? Who covered for different things here and there so that the abuse could occur? What about those of you who, knowing Uncle Ray Ray is the one been messing around with all the kids in the family, and you leave Uncle Ray Ray in a room with a child? What about you? You just left him in there. You went to the back room and left him up in the front room with little Johnny. What about those of you who keep these secrets and don't share it? What about those of you who know full well that someone has the capacity to abuse or has abused in the past, and you don't open your mouth and warn future people coming in contact with them? And that's physical abuse. That's sexual. That's emotional. That's financial. That's all the abuses. If you know that someone has financially abused others in the past, you have a duty to either try to address the abuser to help them get help, or at least warn the next victim in some way. If you know a pastor has abused people in the past, you have a duty to either address that pastor and get him to stop one way or the other, or you warn the victim and stand with them when they come to terms with it. And if they need help with it, then you have a duty to help them. You have a duty when a child has cried out to you that they're being victimized or that they're being abused, to step in and stop the abuse in whatever way you can. And I don't mean just call the police or call CPS. Let's just get real. In the melanated community, you have a duty. What they say, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to handle our issues. If you know your next door neighbor is constantly beating on their children, you go over there and you talk to them. Offer them some alternatives. Offer them some help. Offer for the child to come hang out at your house and play with your child. Get the child out of the environment until you can get some sense into the parent. Whatever it is, bottom line, it is not okay to turn a blind eye when you know abuse is going on. And this is for everybody, because all of us have some role in it, whether we're the abuser, whether we're the one that turned the blind eye, whether we're the victim, we're the one that pretend it's not happening. Whatever our role is in this, we all have a role. What about those of you who blame, who tear down, or who vilify the victim when the victim finally speaks and help cover up for the abuser? Why? Are you hiding your guilt? Is it that you don't want the world to know that you're guilty because you knew about it and you did nothing and you said nothing? You don't want the world to know that you heard that victim cry for help and you denied it? You don't want the world to know that you facilitated the actual abuse to occur? You don't want the world to know that you saw it happening and you said or did nothing? Or maybe it's because you like the abuser. You like the abuser. They showed you such a good side. They put on such a good show for you. You had a relationship with them. You're, a friend, a cousin, a auntie, whatever your relationship is with them. And you allow your relationship to cloud your judgment over what's right and wrong. Or here you go. Some people do this. You dislike the victim. Because you don't particularly care for the victim. It's okay that they're abused. Or you're going to turn a blind eye to their abuse because you don't like them? That's just plain evil. That's just plain wrong. One thing I know I personally have always lived by is, I don't care if I like you or not, right is right and wrong is wrong. And I know several people will stand and verify, I don't particularly care for the people, but if they're being done wrong, I speak up in their behalf. And when that issue is over, I go back to feeling, how I felt about them if I didn't particularly care for them. Actually, that never changed. And I don't have to deal with you anymore, even on a personal level or whatever. But if you're being mistreated, I'm going to speak up. That's just the way I operate. But what about those who tell the victims to get help? I've heard this many times. You need to get some help. But you provide them no support to get that help. No tools with which to get that help. I've even heard some people ask the victims, well, how can I help? If you know anything about abuse, more often than not, the victims don't even know how you can help. They're still trying to figure out how to process what happened. They're probably still trying to figure out how to go to sleep at night. They're probably still trying to figure out where to put that, how to process it, which filing cabinet in their brains to put it in. They probably don't even know what it's going to take to get them back to some sense of normalcy, if you will. So, for those of you who I've heard ask the victim, how can I help? And the victim can't give you a definitive answer, to walk away, oh, well, she never told me how I could help, or he never told me what I can do, is not enough. That's your excuse to say I offered and they didn't tell me, so I kept it moving. That's being lazy. That's passing the buck. That's turning a blind eye. Because I'm here to tell you, victims often don't even know what help they need. Sometimes all they need is just for you to be present. Sometimes all they need is just for you to be present as they're processing. Sometimes all they need is a smile. All they need is a hug. An encouraging word as they're processing. It's not too much to ask. And then sometimes they need you to stand up and go to court with them. Sometimes they need you to stand up and speak about the character of the person that, they're alleging abused them. Sometimes they need you to stand up and speak about the character they are or have. Sometimes you may have to speak. Sometimes it's just a matter of sitting silent. Sometimes it's just a matter of, if they have kids, go get the kids. Take the kids for, an overnight or, for 4 or 5 hours on a Saturday and give them time just to process. Because here's the deal. Abuse doesn't just happen one time. Whether it's a one-time sexual abuse, a 6-month sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional, financial, whatever it is, they all have long-term consequences. And the victim has to deal with it for the long term. So a one-time fix today does not fix the problem. In the case of financial abuse, if by chance the abuser somehow manipulated someone out of $5,000 and they wrote them a check back, took 6-7 months, however, to get it. In those 6 or 7 months, how much financial damage would have been done to the victim? And so writing them that $5,000 check back doesn't change. Yeah, it puts money in their pocket, but by then they're probably in debt, an extra $2,000 or $3,000 just from whatever checks bounced and whatever late fees and whatever they've had to endure. Just the mere process alone. So that's an example to show an abuse is not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing thing. And the emotional, the psychological impact is carries on for much longer. And that's why in my video where I tell people I recommend that people have therapists, because this is one of those life things that, some people have to endure, that they will need ongoing help for a period of time, so that they can create the new them afterwards with this little piece to their puzzle. And this little piece not have as damaging an impact to them going forward, emotionally and psychologically. Lastly, let me ask you this. What about those who blame the victims, who denigrate the victims for trying to make sense, for trying to make life, for trying to figure out life with this new extra set of baggage and this unimaginable pain? That's the only way I know how to describe it, an unimaginable pain. If you've never experienced it, then you can't imagine what it's like. But there are those who blame the victims as they try to make sense out of life, as they try to do life with this baggage walking around that they didn't ask for, chances are, and they have no idea what to do with. And they've not been given the tools. Actually, they've been shut up, they've been isolated, they've been squashed, they've been intimidated, they've been coerced, they've been threatened, they've had finances taken away, they've had everything done to them to keep them from getting the help, the healing, the restoration, or whatever it is that they might need. So how dare you blame them for having baggage that they didn't ask for? And if you were a facilitator, a perpetrator, a cover-up, whatever your role was, how dare you blame the victim for the baggage that they have that you could have helped prevent? And I say it that way because I want every person that hears this to take a personal responsibility and say to yourself, who in my life has been abused? What was my role? Did I do what I needed to do? If I spoke up, if you're one of those who have spoken up, great. Thank you. We appreciate you. We need more of you. Send me a video or send me some step-by-steps I can put up here for people to know step-by-step how you did it, so we can share with others how to do it. But for those of you who turned a blind eye, who covered up for the abuser, who tried to make the victim everything other than a child of God, who defamed them, who isolated them, who ostracized the victim, and don't let the victim be children or a child, how dare you allow a child to carry baggage for an abuser, a known abuser? You are the lowest of low. And I don't usually get on here saying anything negative about people, but in this case I'll say it. You are the lowest of low. If you see someone abusing someone else, whether it's physically, whether it's sexual, whether it's emotional, whatever the manner in which they're doing it, and you say nothing and you do nothing, and when the victim cries out, you shun them, you isolate them, you ostracize them, you do everything you can to shut the victim up, to hide it and to sweep it under the rug, you are the lowest of low. You are right down there with the actual perpetrator. And that's actually my point in all of this with this whole R. Kelly situation. I'm hearing, oh, he's been a pedophile all this time, etc., etc. Oh, and she, her mama let her go, so her mama wanted the money, or her daddy did this, he wanted the money, she wanted the money. We're hearing all of that. But all of those people who sat back and watched, those are the ones I'm speaking to. All of the ones who knew better and didn't warn the next female, those are the ones I'm speaking to. And then to take it to Main Street, all of those who are sitting back watching the abusers, who are helping the abusers, who are doing anything they can to help the abuser and further denigrate, further defame, further tear down, and further further abuse the victim. You're who I'm talking to. Feel free to drop me a direct comment. It's definitely worth conversation, people. It's definitely worth conversation. We will never get through this as a community, as a people, as melanated people. We will never get beyond it if we don't start pulling back those carpets. Pull those carpets back. Pull this dirt out from underneath the carpets and start dealing with it. Start owning your stuff. Abusers, if you've been abused as a child or sometime in your life previously and now you've begun to abuse others, I won't say the term there's nothing wrong with it, but guess what? People will understand. People can help you better. But you got to own it. You have to find somewhere, sometime, someplace and own it. And then people are willing to work with you. What you can't do is sweep it under the rug and expect people to sweep it under the rug and continue victimizing more people, more children, more women, or in the case of pastors and church members, more church members, innocent people come into your church with the intent to seek salvation or seek some way to live life in the world that we live in today. And this is not discussing whether the church is valid, not valid, Christianity, Islam. It's not about that. It's the fact that a person came to you, your religious organization, with the intent to try to get some peace or some inner understanding, some faith to live the life that we have to live on this earth in the times that we're in, and you took advantage of them. That's what that's about. That spiritual abuse. That's all that's about. We can discuss Christianity, Islam, the Kemites, and spirituality on a whole nother video. That being the case, I hope you guys take heed. Start pulling those carpets back. Get that dirt out from underneath those rugs. Start dealing with those specks of dirt. And if you know someone who's been abused and you have not personally called and apologized to them for not doing your role, how about do that? It'll go a long way. Personally, contact them. I'm sorry. I should have acted. I did not. Will you forgive me for not acting? How about that? That'll go a long way for the victim. I promise you it will. And if you know of situations that are active right now, do your part. If you know of someone who's being financially abused, cyberbullying is abuse as well. Who being cyberbullied, do your part. Enough is enough. Because remember, time is winding down. Time is winding down. Stuff's going to happen, and it's going to happen quick. And like a thief in the night, it's going to happen. That being said, you guys be blessed. I hope you are able to get a puzzle piece, put it together, or if you're not putting together your own puzzle piece, how about help someone else put a piece of their puzzle together? Open your mouth for these victims. Every single one of them. And again, if you were a perpetrator or if you were a facilitator, open your mouth to the victims. Apologize. Atone for it. It'll go a long way. Take care.